welcome back to another video. Thanks again for taking your time out of your busy day to check out my ramblings about my former religion. In this video, we're going to be talking about Kingdom Hall construction, RBC, and eventually the transition into the LDC arrangement. Now, I've had a lot of experience over my 38 years as a Jehovah's Witness with Kingdom Hall construction, remodeling, and RBC work. So I'll be going through the period of why they did it, why did the RBC arrangement come in, and what can we learn from that going forward. So let's start back in early history. Now again, if you haven't watched some of my earlier videos, you might not know, but my great-grandmother was baptized a witness either in 1921 or 22. She died before I was born, but my grandmother and my mom always told me different years. Her uncle was a World War I veteran who came back from France and was disillusioned with life. He became a Bible student, witnessed to all of his relatives, and only my great-grandmother became a Jehovah's Witness. Now, Grandma Kara had 5 kids, and 3 of the 5 became Jehovah's Witnesses. First Bible students and then Jehovah's Witnesses. My grandmother, Mary, my great-aunt, Margaret, and my great-uncle, Kurt. Now, the other 2 I never met. After World War II, Kurt moved to Indiana, and he settled there. He passed away several years ago. Great-aunt Margaret moved to Oregon after World War II, and I met her many times and visited her in Oregon, and she passed away about 10 years ago. My grandmother died about 9 years ago, and she stayed in the Baltimore, the East Coast area after World War II. Now, all 3 of them told me stories of going to the Kingdom Hall as little kids in the 1920s and early 30s during the Great Depression. Now, they didn't call it a Kingdom Hall, it was just a meeting place. Usually it was set in a storefront, a rented room, upstairs in somebody's house. They didn't really have Kingdom Halls. Now, after World War II, Kingdom Halls were built, especially in Baltimore. At one time in the 50s, they only had 4 congregations. My mom and my grandmother went to the West Congregation in Baltimore in the 1950s. So there were starting to have Kingdom Halls, but that was, again, 50 to 70 years after the organization started. But what about headquarters? Well, headquarters did have a Kingdom Hall in Pittsburgh. It was a meeting place. When they moved to Brooklyn in the early 1900s, they eventually built a Kingdom Hall at 107 Columbia Heights. And the local congregations would use that Kingdom Hall in Brooklyn. In fact, my dad and my mom got married in that Kingdom Hall in 1973. So that wasn't just my great-grandmother and my grandmother's experience. Other places I've talked to, other old witnesses had the exact same experience. As far as I know, there really wasn't any, besides the headquarter buildings, Kingdom Halls before World War II in the United States. My second congregation I attended, actually my third, Tremont, Pennsylvania. In the 1940s, they rented a room from the fire hall to use. Now, the congregation only had about 15, 20 publishers. They couldn't afford to pay for it, so they would do chores for the fire hall. They would, take the trash out. If many people don't realize, but that in Pennsylvania, in the mountains, before recently, most people burn coal for fuel. So constantly you would have to dump big ash heaps of bins, and people would come once a week and collect it and dump the ash. So one old elder I would talk to, in the 1930s as a kid, his job would be to dump the ash every day. He would clean up the cigars in the main room of the fire hall so they could use that at Kingdom Hall. Now, eventually that congregation would build their own Kingdom Hall in 1973. We'll get to them later on. So that was the predominantly action. So after World War II, the society, Watchtower, decided that they needed Kingdom Halls built. But they didn't have the money, or they didn't have the control they have today. So basically it was left up to each individual congregation what they wanted to do. Now, there was, as far as I know, there was no loan assistance, there was no organization, there was no structure. Again, I could be wrong. Each areas of the country could be different. Each areas of the world could be different. But in my area, basically every congregation that I visited to as a friend, giving a talk out, had the similar structure, that they would get some money together, the local congregation, they would buy a piece of property, they would find a brother to draw up the plans, and then they would start building the Kingdom Hall. It might take them 2 years, it might take them 6 months. A lot of meetings were missed, a lot of service was canceled to work on these Kingdom Halls. I know an old brother who was an architect from New Jersey who probably designed hundreds of Kingdom Halls in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and he kind of stopped in the 80s when the RBC arrangement came about. But this was not very efficient. Watchtower is all about numbers. All they care about is getting as much done as possible. So they needed a better way to do this. So they decided to come up with the RBC arrangement. Now, again, I don't know what year it came in. All I know was the first RBC I went to was in 1982. I was 5 years old. Yes, back then, kids were allowed to go to the Kingdom Hall construction. So my grandmother, when she retired, she moved from Baltimore to Eastern Ohio, right on the West Virginia border in Bel Air, Ohio. And she got a part-time job because she was bored. She didn't pioneer when she in retirement. And my grandfather, he loved working in RBCs. And so he took me and my brother along with us to this RBC somewhere in Ohio. I have no idea where it was. It was freezing cold. We slept in this truck each morning. We got scrambled eggs. Now, it was back when we had the 2-day builds. They started Friday. It was done by Sunday. And, we were in the brick line as little kids. My brother was probably 4 and I was 5. And we worked all day. The brothers did build a sand pit for us, so we did play with our toy trucks and something. But they ran out of sand for the concrete, so they kicked us out of that sand pit and sandbox, and then they took that sand to make more concrete. So that was an option back then. So when the RBC came in, you had the option of doing a quick build through the RBC. But again, the organization didn't have the direct control they have today with each congregation. Because in the 80s, it was an option. You can build yourself, remodel yourself, or you can pick the RBC. It was your choice. A lot of brothers did not like the RBC because it was control and power. They said it was too much money, the costs were too high. The RBC approved the land. If they didn't like the land, they would say, you can't build here, you have to sell. So a lot of congregations did not go with the RBC arrangement during the 1980s. Back then, we had 2 RBCs in Pennsylvania. Basically, the center of the state, the Susquehanna River to Philadelphia, was one RBC. From the Susquehanna River west to Pittsburgh was the second RBC. There was 5 brothers in charge of that area. They were on a committee, and they had a lot of power, a lot of say, and a lot of sway in the local congregations. It was their decision whether to okay that or not. And they were not really directly controlled by the headquarters of the circuit overseers or what. They were their own little fiefdoms, their own little powers. And some really nice guys and some are big jerks. So how do I know this? Well, again, when my dad was assigned from the Red Lion congregation in 1982 to the Prospect congregation in New York City that year, we had a lot of elders. The circuit overseer asked my dad to go over and help. Again, I was 5. That was the same year I was in my first RBC. We were meeting in an old Kingdom Hall. It had been there for like 20, 30 years. It was downtown York. There was no street parking. There was no place to park your car. So there was 3 congregations, 2 English and Spanish, and you would have meeting nights every night of the week. Basically, book studies and service meetings in schools. And you had to park on the street. So you'd have to park 2 or 3 blocks in a bad part of town. Now, York City's not humongous, but it had about 50,000 people at the time. It's about 40-something now. And there are some bad areas of York City. And people would come home from work, and in front of their house would be a witness car, and they would slash tires, they would key cars. People would come out and scream at you, curse at you for parking in their spot. So the elders and my dad decided, let's do our own Kingdom Hall, and let's move out of here. So they looked for about 6 months. They could not find property to build that was suitable to the RBC. They didn't have enough money saved up either. So they decided to buy a piece of property that was abandoned. It was an old factory. They made batteries and computer components, and it was abandoned, electronics. So we took 6 months to clean that place up and remodel it into a Kingdom Hall. We finished in 1985. I was 8 years old. Now, my dad, being an elder, his job was in charge of food, so a lot of Saturday mornings we canceled service, and half the congregation was there working. It seemed like more people would rather work in a Kingdom Hall than go door to door, but why is that? So my dad, he enjoyed that work, and my job was to count how many people there were each day and tell my dad, because some Saturdays we'd have 10, sometimes it would be 50. There'd be almost 100 people, because other people from other congregations would come over and help us remodel this place. So one morning, I was playing in the basement underneath the garage, and my dad comes and finds me and says, Martin, how many people are here today? I'm like, oh, I forgot to count. Let me go count. So I count all the people up, and I tell my dad, he goes, we don't have enough food. So he tells my mom, go get pizza. Here's some money. Buy pizza for the friends. My mom says, you're coming with me because I need help carrying all these boxes. So we go get pizza. We come back. It's like 12 o'clock. I'll never forget this. Again, this was 36 years ago. I was 8. Yeah, 38 years ago. Wow. Yeah, I can't do math anymore. I'm sorry. 36 years ago. And all of a sudden ambulances are passing us and fire trucks are, what's going on? Here, they're ripping off the roof because the roof leaked, of course. It was an abandoned building. And they're throwing all the rubber roof onto the garage. The garage collapsed. There was a father-son working on it. Both were trapped. One they found within minutes. The other one they didn't find for hours. Both survived. One had, a broken leg, multiple places, compound fractures, needed surgery. The other one was just knocked out, the one they found right away. They both were kept in, of course, the guy with the compound fracture was in the hospital many days. The dad, who was just knocked out, was kept over in a hospital overnight for observation. So nobody was killed, but it could have been worse. Now, remember, I was in the basement playing in the garage when this happened. I could have been killed. If my mom didn't grab me for pizza, I probably would have been okay. But my toys were destroyed. We never found them. That was a very sad day. And I just got a new transformer that day, and I never found it again. But, oh well, it is what it is. So that was the kind of lackluster security or safety that the local friends had. They weren't experts. They didn't know what they're doing. And but Jehovah's Witnesses would take any bad thing and they spin it to a positive light. So there's some super wealthy witnesses in Hanover, York County. It's to the west of York City. And they own their own construction company. And they've worked in Patterson and Wallkill. And they've poured foundations for quick builds. And they are multimillionaires. So they have their own heavy equipment, because they've done road work. They have cranes and bulldozers and backhoes. And this was a Saturday. So it's almost impossible sometimes to get a crane or heavy equipment on a weekend. But when they heard about it, they came running over because it was a way to show how holy and special they are. And we had probably, I don't know the estimate. It was like 200 to 300 witnesses came from all over, southern Pennsylvania, Maryland, to help clean up the rescue crew. Because again, the word got out there was a brother trapped in the rubble, so they wanted to get him out. So again, they used that not as a holy crap, we almost killed 2 people because we're stupid. They used it as an idea that this is Jehovah's loving Holy Spirit. Look what we did. Nobody could accomplish this without the Watchtower, without the Holy Spirit. A bunch of bull. I'm sorry, a bunch of bull. Again, that never would have happened if they were actually knew what they were doing. So we finished that remodel. We had about 80 publishers, 75. Our meeting attendance, especially the Tuesday night meeting, was like really bad. People would come Sunday, but it was like 50, 60 people when I was a kid at most Tuesday night meetings. Because my dad was a school overseer back then, and you don't know how many times I would have to do a Bible reading at the last minute because nobody would show up when I was like 5, 6, 7, 8. I joined the school when I was 5, by the way, not to brag, but it doesn't matter anymore. Who cares? So I'm sorry, I'm rambling here, but going back on topic, immediately our attendance shot up, contributions shot up. Brand new Kingdom Hall, nicest one in the area. There really wasn't any RBCs in 1985 in our area. So this was a beautiful hall. We did a great job when it was finished. We had Pioneer School. There was a full basement. KM School for the elders was held here. The circuit overseer loved it. And I realize now that when you spend money, it's an investment. It's like a marketing. That's what all Kingdom Halls are. It has nothing to do with bringing honor or glory to Jehovah God. It's all about the money. By spending that money, you're going to get it back because we went over 100 publishers. We only had 1 or 2 pioneers in 85. By 87, we had 10 or 11 pioneers because everybody was full of the Spirit. Again, it's all about marketing. It's all about name and recognition. So that was my second involvement with Kingdom Hall construction at 8 years old. So then, going back to my congregation I grew up in, Redline, they built that hall in the 1950s. My dad went there as a little kid. So my one uncle, who's an elder, he was over in Lancaster County, and they wanted to start a new congregation in York-Anna on the Lancaster County, York County line in York-Anna. So he, at family gatherings, badmouthed the RBC, how rotten it was, corrupt, it was a waste of money, there's no way it cost that much money, because my uncle owned his own small construction company. So he was a dominant elder, a prick, a very, excuse my language, a very arrogant person. So he's like, I'm going to do my own Kingdom Hall build. It's going to be amazing. We're not doing the RBC. Guess what year this was? This was 1990. I was 13. My dad and I came down many times to help with that quick. It wasn't a quick build, it was a slow build, because they did it all themselves. Now, did it look bigger than Redline? Yes. Was it nicer than Redline? Yes. But Redline had been 30 plus years older by that time. But they had problems with it. They did a bad job plumbing. Water kept backing up. We'll get to that congregation later. And you might remember that congregation from my stories about child abuse, because that congregation comes into play. So this is what's going on. Again, remember, 1980, RBC comes in. Congregations had the choice. RBC, do it yourself. What year did it change? I don't know. I don't know what year the RBC arrangement came in. You have to do this. I do know around 1990 is when the Kingdom Hall Assistance Program came in. So what is that? Well, before 1990, before we had the donation arrangement, it was a contribution. We sold our magazines 50 cents a piece. Books were like $2. Bible was $4 or $7, depending upon the hardcover, or the deluxe was $7. So then we went into the donation arrangement so we wouldn't be taxed by our literature selling. At the same time, we came into the Kingdom Hall Assistance arrangement. This was the first time, looking back, the Watchtower was doing a power grab and getting direct control of each congregation. It was so slow. Even though I was alive during this whole time period, I didn't realize what was happening. So around the Kingdom Hall Assistance Program, the goal was, I remember this meeting like it was yesterday. If each publisher donates $1 a month in America, that'll be enough money to build all the Kingdom Halls we need and remodel. So at the time, there was under 1 million publishers in the United States, probably about 800,000 publishers. That was being around 10 million a year. That's what they wanted. But back then, they would charge 6% interest. So this is the first time that I know that we had a direct loan option for Kingdom Hall construction. Now, immediately after this happened, Kingdom Hall construction blew up in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Jersey, in my neck of the woods. Just blew up. I mean, so many quick builds happened right around this time period. Now, friends could go get a loan from the branch, get that Kingdom Hall. So my wife's congregation, which was Pottsville, Pennsylvania, where I got married in '97, immediately they had it upstairs, downstairs. The bathrooms were downstairs. There was a chairlift for disabled people. There was no lobby. You came right into the Kingdom Hall, and there's the chairs. So there's no place to have like secret elder meetings or counseling during the meeting. My grandmother's old congregation in Bel Air, Ohio was the same way. Open the door, right there. There's the last, like 20 feet, the last seat. There was a Tourette's brother in Ohio who would curse during the meetings in the back. We called him Farky Wow because, I'm sorry, I'm losing it here. Okay, whatever, I'm sorry. So many Kingdom Halls started construction in the early 90s because of this. So my next quick build I worked on, I was 14. It was my future wife's congregation in Pottsville. I helped with a brick line. They even let me run a pettibone, not a pettibone, a fork truck. And then somebody said I wasn't 16, I didn't have a license, so I wasn't allowed to drive that, to move skids of bricks around. Again, a lot of fighting, a lot of craziness in that quick build, but it came out with a beautiful hall. So that was my next thing. So then we're gonna move back to Tremont, my congregation I was in for 10 years, from 87 to 97. And because we moved out of Prospect in 87, we moved up to the mountains in Tremont. And they had built their Kingdom Hall in 1973 with 30 publishers, and it was a bomb shelter. It was all reinforced concrete, steel, brick. There was no wood. It was like, I would fall asleep all the meetings. There was no air moving in there. We had no air conditioning. And the guy who built that was crazy. I've never seen a Kingdom Hall like that since then. They've sold it now. They don't even own it. And they dissolved that Tremont congregation. So in 73, they built that Kingdom Hall with 30 publishers. We moved there in 87. Now there's 100 publishers. It tripled in 15 years. And when I left the Watchtower in 2016, there's about 100 publishers. So it tripled in 15 years. And then in 30 years, it didn't move for one publisher. It gets to that level and stop. So my dad moves in as an elder at 87. It needs remodeled because they had green carpet on the walls, green carpet on the floor, green drapes, green chairs. And the first 4 rows were different kind of theater chairs, and the front 6 rows. The front 6 rows were different color green, and they slid, they would rock, they would recline, and they were all squeaky. So if you would move, you would actually recline, and the whole congregation would know that. It was a bad setup. So we decided to have a vote to remodel in 1991. And it was like 60-30 against, 30 against, 64. We borrowed $25,000 from the headquarters alone and remodeled it. And it came out really nice. We got rid of the theater chairs and went to stackables. So that was a lot of tension, a lot of fighting. And I've seen, that was not Jehovah's Holy Spirit in action. I'm sorry, friends. But I do want to back up one more time. There's one more funny story. So my dad was an elder at Bethel for 5.5 years. He met my mom. She was a pioneer in El Salvador. They got married in 73. They could not stay at Bethel because at the time you had to be at Bethel for 10 years. So Bethel assigned my 25-year-old father as a presiding overseer of Richwood, West Virginia, and as a special pioneer, my mom, right after they left Bethel. So that was my dad's first assignment. And that Kingdom Hall didn't have a bathroom, had an outhouse, and they lived in a basement, in a 1-bedroom in a basement. And people would come into their room during the meeting and take their food out of the refrigerator, drink their beer. And my dad's like, we need to remodel this hall as a presiding overseer. And I've heard so many stories about when they got the money together to remodel, people would come and destroy things they did during the day because they did not want, like, my house doesn't have a bathroom. Why should I have a bathroom in the Kingdom Hall? So eventually they finished that Kingdom Hall, but the Richwood congregation has been dissolved also. It's no longer a congregation. So all that hard work my dad went for naught. So there, again, a lot of anger, a lot of hostility towards the idea of something new or better. So let's move forward back in time to the mid-90s. So, 97, my wife and I married. We moved to the Ephrata congregation in Lancaster County. Ephrata was sharing with Honeybrook. Ephrata had just sold their Kingdom Hall about a month or 2 before I moved in, and Honeybrook was in the process of selling their Kingdom Hall. And they're going to build a hall together. So about 3 or 4 months after we moved in August 97, Honeybrook did sell their hall. March of 98, we built the new hall. And it was in Honeybrook's territory, so there was always tension between the two congregations. Like, Ephrata wasn't their hall, we had to say the colors. There was so much bickering and fighting during that quick build. My wife and I were working 3rd shift back then, and we got there first thing at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's ambulances there. Here's somebody fell off the roof first thing in the morning. So he was okay. Now, it had rained and there was so much mud. So they rented a bunch of big industrial shop vacs, and my first job was to suck all the mud off the pads when they were framing it. And I was in somebody's way, so he kicked the shop vac, then he kicked me in the butt. Yep, I almost said the other word. And he said, oh, I didn't see you there. But he actually definitely kicked me. That was the kind of attitude the quick builds had to the local friends. We'll talk about that later. The local people who worked out, the quick build workers always treated them like they knew nothing and they were idiots. So that was not a fun quick build. The Amish and the Mennonites in the area, they came onto the property at night, so they stole the water pump out of our well because the Amish people, teenage boys, like to do pranks like that. Our Kingdom Hall sign they stole. We're pretty sure the Amish kids did that because this Kingdom Hall is in the middle of nowhere. There was no town around it, and it was just Amish and Mennonite farms around the area. That was a fun time with all the horse and buggies. So that was the Kingdom Hall there in Ephrata. So my wife and I eventually moved back to Red Line in 99, the next year. The congregation I grew up in, I'm a ministerial servant. And our Kingdom Hall decides to build a new hall because we had an upstairs, downstairs. There was no parking upstairs. There was one bathroom for the disabled upstairs, but it was in the lobby. So every time you flush the toilet, the entire congregation heard. If we remodeled it, we would have to put an elevator in for ADA compliance. So they decided to build a new hall in 2003. And that went pretty well. No major complaints. There was a couple jackasses there who were jerks to me because I worked in rooming and other departments, but it went up fine. So if you watch the intro, you'll see the pictures, what happened. But then 4 years later, it burned down. There was a bad lighting, a bad wiring job in one of the pod lights, and it caught on fire, and the Kingdom Hall burned to the ground. They thought it was a hate crime. People investigated. They didn't find anything of it. But it shows what it shows with the RBC, that they're not perfect. They're just like unpaid volunteers. So, you know, Watchtower rebuilt the Kingdom Hall. They paid we paid in the insurance program. We didn't have to pay a penny. I can't fault Watchtower for that. Lawyers came and wanted to represent us among the in the insurance claims, but we didn't need it. So I'm going to badmouth Watchtower all I can, but in this case, they came through. So after this, I was moved to join the RBC, and I became a drywaller because I worked for my uncle as a teenager in drywall, so I knew that skill. And this is the time where I really saw the RBC who they were. Now, there was a lot of bullheaded men, cocky men, men who liked to prout their arrogance and how awesome they were, and to belittle you and make fun of you. So I worked the best because I was not a professional. I worked the best if you give me a room, give me the bathroom, let me sheetrock by myself, give me a crew, give me the second school and I'll do fine, or the closet behind the stage. I hated an audience staring at me. So we were doing the Reading congregation, Kingdom Hall, and it had snowed the night before. Only 7 hangers showed up, and we were so short. I worked 13 hours. Remember, I'd worked 8 hours the night before, third shift, running a printing press. Then we drove. I did sleep like a half an hour in the car. My wife drove over, and we got there 8 o'clock in the morning, and I worked till 9 that night, and we weren't done. And I'd be up there with 5/8 sheetrock, 12-footers in the ceiling. If anybody doesn't know, that's really heavy. And they would give me 3 kids, teenagers, who knew nothing about that, and they were holding it. And you'd have all this peanut crowd gallery of old brothers just sitting there who aren't working, just making fun of you. And that was really heartening. Our overseer, the drywall crew, was a jerk. A lot of professional drywallers can take a knife and with a chalk line or tape and just cut it like this perfectly. I'm not that skilled because I only did it, So I would snap a chalk line and cut it along the chalk line, and he would yell at me every time, "You're wasting time, you're wasting time. That's how you do it. Your cuts aren't good enough." So he shut the whole schedule down. We were doing Chambersburg Kingdom Hall. The whole crew shut him down, and I was putting up in the auditorium, and my gap went from like a 1/16 to a 1/4 inch among the other piece. "Look at this cut, that's horrible." And I said, "Randy, the mud's gonna cover that. You're never gonna see that. I want it under an 1/8 of an inch gap. I don't want a 1/4 inch gap." Belittling me, making fun of me the entire time. It was very heartening. So Grantville Assembly Hall in Grantville, Pennsylvania was an old building, and they had brick in the walls inside, and they wanted to cover up that brick. So they decided to nail boards to the brick and then put sheetrock over top of it. But again, even though I wasn't super fast, I was good. So another brother who had his own drywall company, my friend, he's also an extra Jehovah's Witness now. In 6 hours, we hung 47 sheets of sheetrock in 6 hours at Grantville. I mean, it's not the best. It's pretty good, though. And they were 10 and 12 footers. And another crew of 5 people did like 13. So that Randy guy comes over and he said, "2 guys did triple what you did. How dare you come up here? You better not be counting this as service time because you did nothing in 6 hours." They were a pioneer couple who I used to be friends with, but they're nice people, but they're never going to wake up. They're brainwashed. Like, how dare you? How dare you treat these people like this? Who do you think you are? That was the attitude that I had in the RBC work. It was, I just put it aside. But I know this video is getting long. We're going to get to the point. So, what is the point of this video? It's not just me rambling stories. The point of this video is to show the slow control of Watchtower over the congregation. So, when did it happen? When was the date? I don't know. Maybe somebody knows. When did it go for the point of RBC or by yourself, you have to do the RBC? All I know was in 1997, when I moved to Ephrata, Pennsylvania, the one elder said to me that the whole body of elders in Mount Penn got removed because they did not want to build a new Kingdom Hall. Their hall was paid off, and they did not want to have a new Kingdom Hall. So the Circuit Overseer removed all 8 elders and brought in 5 or 6 new elders, because from 1990 to 1997, somewhere in that 7-year gap, you had to do what they said. You had to remodel, you had to build. That was the first step, looking back at what we see today with the dogmatic hierarchy structure of the organization. A couple more things will wrap this video up. So what else did I notice in the attitude of Kingdom Hall construction? Well, right towards the end, so I joined the RBC in 2003, and I left in 2016, and so it was about 13 years I worked hanging drywall. That towards the end, they got really safety conscious. We had to wear safety glasses. We had to wear steel toes. We had to watch safety videos. We had to wear gloves the entire time. But why was that? Was it because they loved us and cared for us? No, it was about monetary money. They didn't want people to get hurt because we were worried about suing. Same time, Bethel, my dad worked in a printery. I had other friends who worked there. You didn't have to wear steel toes or safety glasses or gloves or hearing protection. And guess what? Right the last couple of times I went to Bethel, everybody had safety glasses on. Everybody had steel toes on. Everybody had to have hard hats on. It just showed you they changed because the world changed. Because I've been printing for 26 years, and we have to wear earplugs. We have to wear safety glasses. We have to wear cut-resistant gloves. 5 or 6 years ago, we never had to do that, But now, maybe 7, 8 years ago, it's the whole industry has changed. It's not about loving people. It's about saving yourself. So one more thing I want to bring up, that kids aren't allowed on the RBC sites anymore because in 1993 or 4, a 13-year-old girl was killed by a pettibone on a quick build. I cut myself multiple times hanging sheetrock, without gloves on. Nothing super bad. Nothing needs stitches. But we were doing a fire break wall in a Circuit Overseer's apartment. No, excuse me, it was a Special Pioneers apartment at the Westminster Kingdom Hall, and we were in the rafters putting the fire break up, and one kid, he wasn't a kid, he was in his 20s, but he was younger than me. He fell through into the floor. He was taken to the hospital. I almost fell through because you had to stand on the rafters. You would see sheetrock, and you would step on it. So it was just a dangerous job that unpaid professionals were doing it. So to wrap this video up again, is this video going to wake anybody up? I doubt it. But this video is here to show, again, the cold hard-heartedness of the Watchtower organization. For going back 120 years. All it's about name recognition, saving face, and how good they are. Now, part 2. What's going to happen in part 2? We're going to talk more about the money issues of the RBC. I'm going to talk more about the transition to LDC, the great money grab of 2015 when the Watchtower stole tens of millions of dollars from congregations. So if you're not a witness in 2015, I was there when it happened. I was in the room when it happened, and that did not wake me up. It took me a whole other year to wake up. So thank you for watching, and I'll try to get the next video up as soon as possible. Have a great day.